You cover the Niners and the Eagles, so I think you're the perfect person to ask this next question to. The 49ers have the best offense in the NFL, despite the fact that they ranked 20th in pass block win rate at 55.6%, 23rd in run block win rate at 70%. And they're doing this with Trent Williams, maybe one of the greatest left tackles in the history of football, sitting there at left tackle in the key spot. So there's no question. We've already kind of hit it here. The pressure on Purdy definitely caused some problems in the Super Bowl. As far as I'm concerned, it's Williams at left tackle, it's Banks at left guard, and then it's question mark across the board. You've watched the Niners and the Eagles. The Eagles arguably have had the best line in offensive line. I really believe that football starts with your offensive line. And yet the 49ers have been able to have the best offense with the best weapons, one of the best play callers, really good play from Purdy. But they can't climb the top of the mountain because they have ignored their offensive line. What do you do here? I mean, Colton McKivitz ranked 50th among qualified tackles and pass block win rate. Jake Brendel was 25th among centers. They badly need an infusion of talent along that offensive line. How do they solve this without making trades? Because I'm looking at, I looked at the free agent market, Chase, and there's some good guards, but there's not really maybe Trent Brown. I mean, there's outside of Trent Brown, I don't see a tackle that they could sign that would really make a difference. I think you got to solve that in the draft. And then when you get into the draft, you realize you probably got to be in the top 15 to 20 picks. Yep. They're at 31. How are they going to do this?
Well, you bring up the Philadelphia Eagles. When they made it to the Super Bowl in 2022, all 5 of their offensive linemen were either a Pro Bowler, an All-Pro, or a Pro Bowl alternate. Can you imagine what the 49ers would have been able to do really since 2021 when these offensive line issues started to come to the forefront if they fortified offensive line? And what doesn't make a lot of sense to me, this is an organization that's very smart, very well run. You don't make it to 4 NFC championship games in 5 years and 2 Super Bowls during that time frame if you're not a well-run organization. And they do a great job of drafting a lot of players, signing other players in free agency. And then this coaching staff and this scouting department, they've done a good job of pinpointing players, but also grooming them and developing them. The Niners, over the last couple of years, have had some of the most stacked rosters in the National Football League. But in 2021, how did they lose the NFC Championship game partially? You can talk about the Jaquiski Tartt dropped interception, certainly. Trent Williams was hurt that game. What was the play that ended the game? Aaron Donald getting pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo. He tries to throw to JaMycal Hasty, goes off his hands, intercepted, game over. Niners blew a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. Last year, NFC Championship game against Philadelphia. I know that they had Tyler Kroft on the perimeter lined up against Hassan Reddick. That was obviously a play that changed the entire game. I would have loved to have seen what the Niners were able to do full strength with Brock Purdy playing quarterback for 4 quarters instead of Josh Johnson coming in and then Christian McCaffrey having to throw passes in an NFC title game. But all throughout the NFC Championship game, the Niners got their asses kicked up front. And then you look back to what happened against Dallas. That game was really close because the Cowboys' defensive line manhandled the Niners up front against their offensive line. Even against Seattle in the wild card round, that game was close in the first half because Seattle's defensive line was able to play really well. We've been talking about offensive line being a porous unit for this team and the biggest weakness for 3 years now. And not only do they ignore it, not only do they not invest in it in the draft or free agency, last year they don't take, Larry, a single offensive lineman in the entire draft. They took a kicker and 2 tight ends in the draft. Cam Latu isn't even an NFL player. They took him in the 3rd round when
couldn't catch a cold.
Yeah, there were still really good offensive linemen on the board. And now with this great roster that you've had over the last 3 years. You've made it to 3 straight NFC championship games, 1 Super Bowl. And the consistent theme is that the offensive line has let this team down. And now you have a roster that's starting to get a little bit more expensive. You have a roster where the prime players are starting to get a little bit older. And now the pressure is on you, where I think going into 2024, this could be the last dance for a lot of the core players on this team when you talk about the bona fide dogs on this squad. Now, could the Niners make some major moves in free agency now? I do want to hit on that because
Yeah.
NFL just announcing the salary cap was expected to be in the neighborhood of $243 million. It is going all the way up to $255 million. Mike Florio had a report the other day that maybe it was going to blossom to 250. 255 is a huge deal. So now the Niners have a lot more cap space.
Yeah.
And they have more financial capital at their disposal to spend on their own players like a Brandon Ayuk. Maybe you don't have to cut or restructure some of the other contracts like a Kyle Juszczyk, a Dre Greenlaw. I know our cut candidates videos, Larry, caused some controversy among the fan base. But can you pick up a Robert Hunt, right guard for the Dolphins in free agency, who is like a top 20 player in this free agency class? Can you address right tackle with Trent Brown, whose Pro Football Focus grades last year for the New England Patriots were really, really good, a former Niner who is still playing at a really high level? Trent Brown, 579 snaps at left tackle, 2 penalties, 3 sacks, 6 hits allowed, 17 pressures. Pro Football Focus grade of 80.2, run blocking grade of 80.7, and a pass blocking grade of 72.8. Now you have some financial wiggle room here where if you don't address offensive line in free agency or the draft, I just don't know what you're doing. And it's puzzling because this is a Niners team that loves to build in the trenches on the defensive side of the ball, yet you're ignoring the entire right side of the offensive line. And lastly, I didn't love the extension for Jake Brendel last year. He was a Pro Bowl alternate. Cool. He was an NFL journeyman for a reason. And when you were giving him $5 million per year, I thought there were better centers out there who you could have gotten for $5 million per. And that's why he's a cut candidate also.
Yeah, no question about it. And you saw the way he got pushed around in the Bengal game by DJ Reader. I mean, that was like, I felt like I was watching, a first round draft choice playing against FCS competition. I mean, he just got dominated.